Hello and welcome to my channel, In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne and today I have some book recommendations to warm up your January. Have you ever seen, well, of course you have. I mean, you're obviously on the internet, so you've seen those memes about January. You know, the ones like, it's the giant Monday, or it's the Monday of months, or how is it still January, or we are now 3 months into January, or January, it's been 84 years. You know, those memes. That's where we are, guys. That is where we are, where it feels like January has been going on forever, no end in sight, and we're just done, depending on where you are in the world, with the cold, with the snow, or the not snow, and you're just ready for more sunshine and just more joy and more fun. Well, I am here to bring it to you. I know, so nice of me. Last week I felt bad because I had a video with wintry book recommendations, which I offered to you most sincerely, but literally as I was in the middle of making the video, I was realizing, wow, these books are all real downers. Nothing cheerful going on here, with the notable exception of a couple Shakespeare comedies. So I am here to remedy that and offer some cheerful stories and or some heartwarming stories that will brighten up your days if you're feeling a little bit done with January. So let's start with the rom-com category. I have a couple different categories here, ranging from Christian fiction to classics to a smattering of other random things. Let's start with the rom-com category. To begin with, this is a little bit of an older Christian fiction book, published in, when was this published? It's gone. Page with the publishing information is gone. Interesting. But I think it was published maybe the 90s, maybe the early 2000s. Not really sure. Anyway, Liz Curtis Higgs is a very funny lady, and not all of her books are funny, but she has a fantastic sense of humor, and this one is just straight up funny. It has been a long time since I've read it, but I do remember laughing hilariously. This is one that probably not as many people have heard about, so I'll give a brief synopsis. Emily Getz and Jonas Fielding are as different as two people of the same age with the same faith living in the same charming Pennsylvania town could be. She loves history, he loves new ideas. She sticks to the rules, he likes to break them. She's into saving relics, he's into saving souls. The one trait they share is a penchant for controlling every aspect of their lives, including their hearts. When Emily's search for an archaeological treasure leads her to the one piece of land she can't have, thanks to Jonas, they choose opposing sides in an engaging battle of wits. It will take an innocent child, a not-so-innocent brother, and a tail-wagging golden retriever to nudge these two stubborn souls in the right direction, forward and upward together. So that is Bookends. She has another rom-com which is also quite hilarious, called Mixed Signals, which is about two people who are radio DJs. What do you call the people who like talk on the radio? You know, those people. Anyways, Mixed Signals is about that, two people who are radio show hosts. Anyway, and that one is also very funny. So that is one recommendation. Then I have, some of these are more like author recommendations, and I'll just show you a copy of a book that I happen to have, or mention some of theirs that I've read that I really enjoyed, because they tend to write in more of a humorous genre. So the next one would be Regina Jennings, who writes a lot of great historic rom-coms. And this one is probably my favorite of hers, although she has quite a few really funny ones. This is A Most Inconvenient Marriage. Abigail Stewart thought she was Jeremiah Calhoun's widow, but Jeremiah Calhoun is very handsome, very alive, and very perplexed. Most inconvenient indeed. It's like a case of mistaken identity sort of thing, She marries this soldier. She's a nurse. She marries this soldier. He passes away, and he gives her his, well, she is now obviously the owner of his property. So she goes to his property and she takes over the property, whatever, as his wife. But then she discovers, well, she doesn't discover for a while, the actual owner of the property comes, and that's not the guy that she married, and he's very much alive. And so then they have to figure out what to do from there. Anyway, so case of mistaken identity. And it just provides really humorous situations. And there are a lot of other books by Regina Jennings that would fall into that category. So another recommendation for something funny to make you laugh and smile. Karen Whitmire is another Christian rom-com author who mostly writes historical fiction. A lot of them are set out west, like in Texas, or I think some in the Midwest as well. Short Straw Bride is probably one of my favorites by her. I think that she was inspired perhaps by, I think, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers with this story. Anyway, it's funny. It's a fun love story, and it's also heartwarming. Anyway, this is a good one. I remember this one making me laugh as well. And Karen Whitmire, all of her books will make you smile, and they're just fun, lighthearted romances that you will enjoy. Another one that I do not have a physical copy of is Pepper Basham. She writes a lot of great rom-coms, both contemporary and historical. A lot of them are set in like the southern United States, like North Carolina sort of area. But she has some that are in England as also. Her most recent series has been very popular. Actually, a couple of her most recent series. The one I didn't love as much, the historic one. The other one, the epistolary novel series, I really enjoyed the first one, Authentically Izzy. And then there's Positively Penelope, and I think the third one about Luke, which I do not know what it is called. Anyway, that one I think is coming out this year. So those are really funny, epistolary style, which you may or may not enjoy. It also involves a kind of made up country that's supposed to be in like the British Isles somewhere, like Skymar maybe, like somewhere along in there. I think it's the name, Skymar is what it's called. Or I'm mixing that up with something. I don't know. I don't have the actual book with me, so I don't know. I can't remember. But it is funny, and the exchange of emails and text messages, etc., very humorous. So that is another author that I recommend if you just want a little happy, pick-me-up, cheerful read. Along those lines, Becca Kinzer is a newer author, and she wrote Dear Henry, Love Edith, which was another funny, it's not really epistolary, but there is an exchange of letters between the two main characters in that one. And also funny little rom-com. I think I personally liked Authentically Izzy better than Dear Henry, Love Edith, but it was also very good. And she has another one coming out this year, or yeah, I believe this year. So anyway, another cheerful pick-me-up sort of book if you want that. Let me see, what shall I offer next? Okay, another one who is not specifically Christian, but writes clean rom-com fiction that I find actually to be funny is Emma St. Clair. I have only read a couple of hers. I've read The Buy-In and A Holly Jolly Christmas, a Christmas novella, both set in the fictional town of Sheep Cake, Texas. She's got a whole series set there. And then she has other, I think almost exclusively, if I'm not mistaken, contemporary rom-coms. So those are all, I'm assuming they're all fun. The two that I have read were very funny, and I enjoyed them, and also clean. So I am going to read some more of hers whenever I just want a quick fun read. So I am recommending her to you also. So those are the main ones that I have for rom-coms, contemporary and historic. In the same vein, but more a little older and a little more, I don't know what the word is you want to use. I don't know. But that would be Georgette Hare, which I have several of her books. This is Cotillion, and this is Arabella. Georgette Hare, she's just very witty. Like, you know, think Jane Austen, Georgette Harris, very late, and I've read her Regency romance novels, which are very humorous. I've also read one of her detective mystery novels, murder mystery, and it was also very funny. So highly recommend for a pick-me-up. And if you don't want to feel like you're losing brain cells, which you might with a fluffy rom-com, you can read Georgette Harris. Very funny, but not quite so brainless, perhaps. And might give you a little more, a little bit more depth, not really in terms of character development or plot, whatever. I mean, these are just pretty zany, but in terms of actual writing style and narration, etc., and like not character development per se, but like there is a great deal of insight into human character in the characters that she draws. They're kind of like caricatures, so in some of them, in many ways. So they kind of highlight the ridiculous in each person, which I know that Jane Austen would highly approve of that. So anyway, these are good ones to read if you like that sort of thing. A little bit of wit and some biting humor when it comes to human nature, and anyways, and they get into like zany situations and madcap kind of funny romp sort of things. So definitely a good funny pick-me-up. And in a similar vein, P.G. Wodehouse, I have only read one novel by him, and that was Something New, which was the first in a series, and I've not read more. Blanding's Castle, I think, was the series. I read it on my Kindle, so I don't have an actual book. I have another book of his on my Kindle that I want to read. Forget the name of it, but he wrote a lot of different ones, funny ones that I have often seen recommended to me as lighthearted, funny reads, but that are still, you know, more intelligent perhaps than just a little bit of a fluff reading, and with a lot of, you know, wit and humor. Again, he was an author in the 20th century, earlier in the 20th century than Georgette Harris. He was previous to her. So I think his are mostly set in the early 20th century, like 1915, around their sort of time period. So P.G. Wodehouse is another one that you would probably enjoy if you like humorous stories. The next one, also an author in the 20th century, but more mid-20th century, and that would be Paul Gallico. In particular, I've only read a couple of his books about Mrs. Harris. Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, and then there's one where she goes to New York. And very lighthearted, somewhat humorous stories, very cheerful, not a lot of serious drama happening in the stories, just something fun to read. So another recommendation for you. And then we have James Herriot, who, if you haven't yet read his stories or his collections of tales about his life as a veterinarian in England, again in the 20th century, you will probably really enjoy that. All Creatures Great and Small is one that I read last year or the year before, and I didn't know why I had waited so long in my life to read it. It was so delightful. It was humorous and heartwarming, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I do want to read some more of the books that he's written, and I have never even seen like either the old or the new PBS or BBC series, so I want to watch those too. And I feel like this would be a good time of year to watch those. Like, just very, seems to really fit the season. If you want to go back even further for a classic book, I read 3 Men in a Boat for Victober last year, and it was funny and humorous, set more in the very early, no, it was Victorian era, right? But maybe very early 20th century, very late 19th century. It's about 3 men who take a boat ride down the Thames, and their adventures and misadventures, etc. It was quite humorous, and I did enjoy it, so that's another funny one, but a little more classic. Another classic funny book is by the Queen of Wit, in my opinion, which is Jane Austen. And any of her books, I feel like this would be a great time of year to read her books. They're lighthearted, and you know, they're deep without coming across that way. You know, like you just read it and you're just enjoying it, and you don't realize how deeply she delves into human character in her stories. You're just enjoying the story, and also she's just very funny. So I love Jane Austen, but today I want to particularly recommend her Juvenilia, which is not necessarily an example of great literary style or anything, because she wrote them when she was a teenager, but all the same, hilarious, quite funny. This little collection I have has several of stories that she wrote. Love and Friendship, Leslie Castle, The History of England, a collection of letters, and The Three Sisters. And none of those are very long. They're just short and very funny. The first one is epistolary. Love and Friendship is epistolary. It's called A Novel in a Series of Letters, Deceived in Friendship and Betrayed in Love. And people think that probably she wrote these letters and kind of one at a time, and entertained her family by reading them aloud. The next one is also epistolary, Leslie Castle, an unfinished novel in letters. And as I said, unfinished, so there's no ending to that one. And yeah, anyway, these are funny. Jane Austen is just hilarious. Also, her collection of letters. Some of them are mundane, and some of them are more serious and earnest, and also quite funny. Next, this one is kind of like a bit of an outlier. It doesn't really belong to a category per se, but I recommend it if you want something just fun to read, and that is The Princess Bride by William Goldman. And I know Katie at Paperbacks and Ponytails will agree with me on this one. The Princess Bride is just fun to read, fun to watch. So if you haven't read the book yet, and you've seen the movie but you haven't read the book, it's just really funny. So, and it's very much like the movie. So go ahead and read the book. You'll enjoy it. Now I have some suggestions that are more in like a heartwarming vein, not necessarily meant to make you laugh, but just more of to generate more of a contented kind of happiness, if that makes sense, or to more just thinking about more pleasant things in a more pleasant vein, not dealing with anything super heavy or deep, but just heartwarming. And the first one is, I haven't read this since I was a teenager. This was a series, I have the last two, Seasons of the Heart by Jeanette Oke, and I have here books 3 and 4, Winter is Not Forever, and which is one wintry book that probably won't, leave you crying. And then Spring's Gentle Promise, and it's just very gentle story set on a farm with a small cast of characters and doing life through the course of the year. And two young people, they fall in love over the course of the story, and they just making their way in life. And I don't know, it's just very gentle, very peaceful overall kind of stories. And I have fond memories of reading them as a teenager. These were the first romance novels my mom would allow me to read when I was like 12 or 13, because they're very clean. And I just remember them very fondly. So recommend, just for a nice, heartwarming, fun read. And they're basically classics now because they were written, what, in the 80s or something? Let me see. 1989. Vintage. All right, and then more in the nonfiction category of heartwarming, I have here Gift from the Sea by Anne Morrow Lindbergh, which, if you haven't read it, it's not a very long read, and it really is just full of some beautiful quotes and thoughts and her reflections on life while she's at the sea on vacation, and just using her experiences on vacation as they're kind of like metaphors or analogies for things in life she's reflecting on, relationships, and a lot about relationships, and just life in general, and the lessons that she learns from the sea and from being at the seaside. Lovely little book. that I thoroughly enjoyed. And then these, I read this many years ago by Philip Keller. A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23. And it is amazing how much he digs out of that passage of scripture, which is what, 5 or 6, 7 verses long, and how much he is able to learn, and how much he is able to teach us from the metaphors that are in that chapter about sheep and shepherds and caring for sheep. And it really will just give you such a rich insight into God our shepherd and our life as sheep, and what God is telling us in that passage of scripture in Psalm 23. So really a beautiful little book, not real long, but wonderful and heartwarming. This is a devotion that I read many years ago, Streams in the Desert. It's more of a compilation. Mrs. Charles E. Coleman is listed as the author, but really she just collects like scraps that she had found here and there by various commentators, preachers, authors, and she organized them into a year-long devotional with scripture passages and poems, and it's just really, it's not going to get you like deep in Bible studying. There's usually just like one verse, and then she just has some thoughts by various speakers and authors following that. And the intent is not necessarily to dig deep into each verse and like word study or anything like that. It's a devotional in the truest sense that it's just thoughts, brief thoughts on spiritual life and spiritual things. But as it says, Streams in the Desert, definitely a lot of the devotions are applicable to someone who is going through a difficult time or a dry time or a spiritually dry time, and is just looking for hope and refreshment and encouragement. And as I'm talking about this, I feel like I should use this one again as a devotional at some point. I'm doing other things currently, but this is a very good one that I enjoyed. And I am in quite a few, reading groups and on Facebook and the like. And a question is often asked, either I'm going through something heavy and I just can't concentrate on anything really serious as a book, but I want to read something, or I needed a distraction, or I just finished a really heavy book, so I want to alternate with something lighter. What are some recommendations? And Georgia Hare and P.G. Woodhouse always come up in those conversations, but also another commonly recommended book or genre is children's literature, or read the books that you enjoyed, classic books that you enjoyed as a child. And I think that is great advice. I've never actually done that, but I think that is a really good idea. So I'm offering that to you also, and some of my favorites that I remember from my childhood classic literature are The Moffats, which I have mentioned before on this channel, by Eleanor Estes. I loved The Moffats when I was little, and these are definitely funny and humorous. Those kids get into all kinds of scrapes, and they're very mischievous, and it's a family of children, the Moffats, and all the hijinks they get up to. There are several books in the series, and I recommend them all. And of course, Frances Hodgson Burnett wrote some amazing children's novels. Now, these tend to get a little bit deeper into in the storyline and the plot and the characters. They're not exactly light per se, but being children's fiction, they are easy to read, and they are ultimately, in the end, heartwarming. And The Little Princess, if you're still looking for something seasonal, definitely has a lot of wintry stuff happening, wintry scenes, wintry feeling of things. She's very often cold in her little attic where she has to live for part of the story. So this one definitely is a good read at wintertime, I think. The Secret Garden is, I feel, more of a spring read, because it's all about new growth and revitalization. It's a great one to read in the spring, but if you are wanting to look forward to that a little bit and you're tired of, the deadness of winter, The Secret Garden is a good one to read for. And then, of course, always, Anne of Green Gables is good any time of year, and Anne of Anne of Green Gables, the character, will always make you smile, and she always gets into these scrapes of one kind or another. And as the series goes on, then she has her children who are mischievous as well, and the things that they get into. So highly recommend any book in the Anne of Green Gables series to be a little bit of a pick-me-up. And Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, which I just read in the past year myself or two, are both very good stories, fast moving and just kind of quirky, and you can read them closely and kind of look for analogies and metaphors and whatever, or you can just read it as a fun madcap story and enjoy Alice's romps through Wonderland and the Looking Glass world. A fun read for sure. Good one to read this time of year with a little pot of tea. And finally, The Little Women, which also has some great wintry scenes. I think of the one where Lori and Jo go ice skating and Amy follows them and all of the things that happen after that. Great story with lots of great wintry scenes, but it spans, you know, a whole year or two in their lives. So there's a lot more going on than just winter, but very heartwarming, funny at times, sad at times. There will be times when you will cry, of course. If you read, we all know. But it's ultimately just a really lovely story about this family of 4 girls and their mother, and then eventually their father as he rejoins the family after being at war. Wonderful story. And all of the books by Louise M. Alcott set in this vein, all heartwarming and ones that you would really enjoy, I think. There's Jack and Jill is another actually good one that I don't have a physical copy of, but it's set at winter time, and there is a tragic accident, so there's a little bit of gloom and doom there, but again, ultimately so heartwarming and lovely story. There's sledding in there, and there's yeah, friendships. Most of the characters in the story are young, and if I remember correctly, there's not a lot of like parental involvement in the actual storyline and in the way that things, you know, and what is talked about, discussed, what happens. It really focuses on the children, but it's just a lovely story and one that I want to reread. It's I have a mental list of rereads, and that is definitely on there, one that I want to get to soon, maybe this year, hopefully. So anyway, Jack and Jill, of course, Little Women, but if you've already read Little Women and want to try something else, I also highly recommend Jack and Jill by Louisa May Alcott, and this is the perfect time of year to read it. So I hope that that offsets the gloomy wintry picks that I had for you last week. And I hope that you, whatever you are reading, whether it is gloomy or cheery, that you are enjoying it, and that your January is going well, and is not dragging on too interminably long for you. So let me know in the comments what you are reading now that is keeping your January cheerful and happy, or otherwise, and I'll see you next time. Bye.